strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Through this world of toil and snares, if I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my burden shares? None but Thee, dear Lord, none but Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. When my feeble life is o'er, time for me will be no more. Guide me gently, safely o'er to Thy kingdom shore, to Thy shore. Just a closer walk with Thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea.
That you are walking through a busy downtown street in a major American city, and the sidewalks are just crowded with people. There are workers that are on their lunch break. There are tourists taking photos. There are some activists handing out flyers for their cause. And as you are going along, you pass by this sleek glass-paneled building that houses a well-known debt collection agency. Now, the man who runs that business is a fellow named Zach Monroe. And everybody knows Zach Monroe. They know his name at least. He's rich. Let's assume he's very rich. But he's not very well respected. His company is known for being very aggressive in pursuing unpaid debts and repossessing people's property, exploiting every legal loophole that's available to him. And he's not doing anything that's against the law exactly, but he's gained a reputation for being very cold, very predatory, and most people just avoid this man. He's got such a poor reputation. But there's many people out there that just openly despise him. And as you pass by, you notice someone that has positioned himself on the edge of a planter. And he's straining to see over the crowd. And he looks kind of out of place. He's got this perfectly tailored suit on, and it catches your eye. And so you take a second look, and you realize that's him. That's Zach Monroe. And as you realize that, the crowd around you is beginning to notice that as well, and the whispers start happening, and the atmosphere thickens with judgment and accusations buzz on the lips of the people, and everyone begins to watch, and now it's your moment to decide what needs to be done and what you're going to do. Do you walk past a situation like that and act like nothing's going on? Is that how you respond to that kind of a situation? Or maybe alternatively, you just avoid eye contact with him. You don't want him to realize that you've seen him. You certainly don't want him to realize that you've recognized him, because you assume that that man would never care about the things that you might have to say to him. Let's say things about Jesus, about salvation. Do you confront him about his questionable practices? Or alternatively, do you invite him to join you for lunch? Are you willing to be seen with him? To risk people misunderstanding things and think that you're a friend and the same sort of person as this individual that this whole crowd of people has written off as being of poor character. And it all comes down really to this fifth question: would you share the gospel with him or not? What do you do in a situation like that? Anybody want to offer any comments or thoughts? Now, don't just say, oh, I'd share the gospel with him, because you know that's the right answer. Let's explore this question and ask whether or not we would want to be associated with a character like that, whether or not we would want our name to be connected with him, whether or not we would try to avoid the situation altogether. Yeah, Mr. Woody?
Well, if you've grown in the faith like we're supposed to do, and you're close to Jesus, then you look at yourself and you think, well, he does need to know about God, so I'm going to go over there and talk to him and put my hand on his shoulder and say, how are you? How you doing? Just lightly come and talk to him and see what comes out of it, just being his friend. Somebody's got to try to be his friend, because he's such lowly character and he comes down on a lot of people. Somebody has to step up and do something.
But is that what we do? Yeah, I see a few heads shaking. And they're not nodding, they're shaking. And that is not what we do. Yes, ma'am. Okay, you're assuming you got your car there and you can do that. But you understand the situation. Now, just this afternoon, I was on the way home, and I get to a street corner, and there's a guy on the corner. Looks at me, I look at him. He's actually got a cold drink in his hand, and he waved. And so I acknowledge him and wave back. And a little bit later, felt longer probably than it probably actually was. It was probably just a few seconds later. He actually walks up off the sidewalk, steps down the curb, walks across a lane of traffic, and comes toward my car. And he was probably looking for help. He was not the only one along that little strip. I was actually on the phone with someone who couldn't engage with him directly, but I let him know indirectly that I was not able to talk to him. But I started thinking about that, and thinking about that's actually what we tend to do, actually, is when we see those kind of situations, those kind of questionable characters, those kind of people, that we tend to, first of all, try very hard to make sure that we're not noticed looking. And the moment that the head turns and the eye contact is made, we immediately turn away and hope they didn't notice that we were looking at them, because we're afraid if there's eye contact that what's going to follow? Some deeper engagement. And we don't want that to happen, do we? Now, my scenario that I opened up tonight with is actually the story of Zacchaeus retold for our time. It's a story about a man who is labeled by his profession He's judged by his reputation. He's dismissed by a crowd until Jesus. And Jesus does something that no one else is willing to do. Jesus stops, he looks, he engages, and he calls the man by name, which is, well, that's a good practice to have. If you know someone's name, it's a good practice to call them by name. It means something. I want to turn your attention to Luke 19. And before we move on this afternoon, this, of course, if you hadn't figured it out yet, it's the second Sunday night of the month, so it's Evangelism Encumbrances night. And I've entitled this Zach Monroe in the Crowd. But we're really talking about Zacchaeus in the crowd. Chapter 19 of the book of Luke says, he entered Jericho and was passing through, he there being Jesus. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. And I want to take a moment just to say that chief tax collector, obviously chief means the same thing that it would mean in any situation like this. When you stick chief in front of a job, you're saying that this is a supervisor, that this is someone who has some respect, recognition. Because this is a man who had crawled through the ranks. He was not just an average tax collector. Those people were already hated. Just the Joe Blow tax collector was hated. But this is a man who had been so dedicated to the work, and apparently so good at it, that he had been recognized by the Roman government, elevated to a position of leadership, and we are told specifically that he was rich. Now, we've talked a little bit about these things before. Keep in mind that tax collectors in Judea at the time would have been Jewish citizens who were working for the Roman government to collect taxes for them. And as I understand the way it was done, is there was a certain amount of money that had to be delivered to Rome, but anything that you could extract above that was the collectors to keep. So if this man got rich collecting taxes, he did it by extorting money from people, from taking already high taxes that the Romans imposed and collecting even more, and to a point where he had a good life. And not just an average good life, but he was rich. It says he was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. Understand that a sycamore tree, that was a sycamore fig. It's not like the sycamore tree that grows in America. That's a sycamore fig tree. That was an ancient type of fig tree. It is from Africa in the Middle East, in that area. And so that's what he's done. He's crawled up in this fig tree so that he can get a head up a little bit and see over the crowd. And it says, when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurriedly came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled, he has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. There's a few things about this story we want to talk about for a little while this evening, in connection with our work in evangelism. I want to start with the beginning of this, verses 2 through 5, roughly. Notice to begin with that Jesus noticed this man. How many people do we pass every day that we don't even notice? We pay no attention to them at all. We certainly don't look at them. We're not concerned with them. And we definitely don't engage in any way with them. Jesus noticed this man. Zacchaeus is this wealthy tax collector. He's socially despised, yet he's curious about Jesus. And Jesus sees him in the tree, and he calls him and says, you need to come down out of the tree. Hurry up. We're going to your house. Evangelism starts with seeing people. What do we mean by seeing people? Okay. Which implies what? It's more than just noticing people. It's more than just acknowledging the visage of someone in your sight path. When you talk about seeing people, you're talking about noticing, really noticing them, taking note of them, trying to assess the situation, trying to understand the person and their circumstances. What are some of the things we could say about Zacchaeus if we don't really see Zacchaeus? What are some of the things that we could say about Zacchaeus? He's this short, Jewish, dishonest guy. Or he's this rich guy. How many of you think that some rich guy wants to have something to do with you? He works for the enemy. If you don't really see Zacchaeus as a person, as an individual, he's just the face of the Roman government. You're a friendly neighborhood IRS agent. How many of us would consider, if we were being audited, would consider to say, hey, why don't you come over to the house Tuesday night and we'll have dinner and talk? To the guy who's auditing you. By the way, they probably are not allowed to accept those kinds of things because it would probably be viewed as you trying to interfere with it. But you get my point. That is not the way we would view that individual. And we would not even see that individual as a person, would we? We would not be thinking about their soul. We would not be thinking about their family. We would not be thinking about the problems that they may be going through or the things that they might be interested in. All we would be seeing is what? The tax guy trying to get to our money. But Jesus notices him. And people that others may overlook or avoid, Jesus saw. There's several examples like that in the New Testament where people came to Jesus. In one case, it was a woman who was not a Jew, and the disciples were kind of just like, just get rid of her. And instead, Jesus engages her. There's the woman who touches his garment as he walks by, again viewed as being trouble by the people around him. But Jesus instead does what? He stops and talks to her, engages her. Evangelism begins with actually noticing people and seeing them as people. Seeing them as individuals with the soul that is going to either be received by God into eternal glory or cast away into eternal torment. And looking past the superficial circumstances of the individual, He's a tax collector. He's wealthy. He's of dubious character. And seeing instead that he crawled up in a tree because he was curious about Jesus. See, that's what Jesus notes. Verse 5 of Luke 19. Jesus invites relationship with this man. Jesus didn't stand here on the street and start preaching to Zacchaeus and telling him that all of his methods and behaviors were corrupt and wrong and immoral. Now, I personally believe the Bible is telling us the truth when it says that there is nothing new under the sun. I personally believe that people ultimately are people. No matter where we are, no matter the time, no matter the circumstances, no matter what nation, no matter that ultimately people are people. And I know that there are people out there today who would take someone like him and would call him down, take him to task, question his character, publicly ridicule him, try to make light, expose him. That is not how Jesus reacted. Instead, he said, I'm going to your house. Let's go to your house. Let's sit down and talk. That's a relational thing. It's not even, I'll give you a moment on the sidewalk here and then I'm on my way. It's, hey, I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm not going to go where I was going. And instead, I want you to come with me and we're going to go to your house and we're going to sit down and I want to talk to you. Those are all relational things that show genuine interest and a desire for something that is more than a superficial checkbox. I've done my duty, I handed out a card, or I said something to them, or I challenged them on their evil and told them where they were wrong. I did what I was supposed to. Instead of that, it was, let's go talk. Let's get to know one another. Let me find out about you and your circumstances and what you're interested in. The third thing I'll note about this is highlighted in verse 7, which tells us the reaction that Jesus got from the people in the crowd around him. They grumbled, didn't they? They grumbled and said, well, this guy eats with sinners. So Jesus faced criticism for what he was doing. And true evangelism may require us to bear some social criticism sometimes. But compassion has to win over. I have to be more concerned for someone's soul than I am concerned what other people think about me talking to that person, or me going to that person's house, or me spending time with that individual. Finally, in verse 8, we're introduced to Zacchaeus' response, and at least the way it's recorded here, and I'm not going to suggest for a moment that we have all the story recorded in these verses. I don't believe we do. I believe there's a lot of conversation between Jesus and Zacchaeus that we don't actually get. But we are told of Zacchaeus' response, and Jesus apparently didn't demand repentance of Zacchaeus, and he didn't demand that Zacchaeus stand there on that tree and tell all these people, I've wronged you. Instead, he was willing to wait for Zacchaeus to volunteer, to voluntarily respond and do what was right. Jesus engaged with him, and Zacchaeus, moved by that encounter, offered restitution. And that indicated an actual transformation of his heart. And that's what's got to happen. This is not compelled service that we're trying to accomplish. It's transformed hearts. It's people being changed. And that change only happens from within them. And so we facilitate their change. And the question has to always be, how can I engage with someone? How can I do this in a way that they come to see and that they desire to do? Rather than going to someone and saying, you shouldn't do this and you must do this. And Jesus says, hey, let's go to your house. Let's sit down. Let's talk. And it's Zacchaeus who says, I haven't been doing right. And this is how I propose that I am going to make things right. And then you got verses 9 and 10, particularly verse 10. Verse 9, he says, today salvation has come to this house. Verse 10 is where the real focus comes in. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. That is the mission. And of that crowd of people, it was Zacchaeus that Jesus engaged with. Because Zacchaeus was the one who actually, in a very subtle way, showed that he really wanted to know, despite the fact that his lifestyle screamed that he didn't. And Jesus was perceptive enough to notice his interest and then offer to capitalize on that. Now, what could have happened if Zacchaeus was really disinterested, if he wasn't actually interested in listening to Jesus and learning about Jesus and changing anything about his life? What could have happened was Zacchaeus could have said, when Jesus said, come down, we're going to your house, he could have said what? I don't think so. Now, put yourself in that shoe, in those shoes. Imagine that you're on the street. And there is someone that you're curious about, but you don't really know them, and you know very little about them. You're curious about them, though, so you're kind of looking and trying to see them and learn what you can learn from the peripheral, and that person stops and says, bring me to your house. Now, you don't know this person. How many of you are going to bring them to your house? I've actually had people say, yeah, can you bring me to your house? And I'm going, no, I can't. You tell me what you need, and I'll try to arrange for what you need, but you ain't necessarily coming to my house. I don't know who you are. You just call me on the phone out of the blue. I'm not going and picking you up and bringing you to my house. That is exactly how Zacchaeus could have responded. But what did he do? He came down and went with Jesus to his house. And so, seeking and saving the lost, Jesus said, that's what I'm interested in, seeking and saving the lost. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm doing. Let's have a couple of questions in the time that we have left. We don't have a lot of time left. Who are the Zacchaeuses in our community? Anybody have any thoughts? And who are they? I mean, what characteristics, how might we identify them? I guess is the way I'll ask that question. Okay. But what about business owners with bad reputations? See, those kind of people are the Zacchaeuses of our day. But the fact of the matter is, the minute I say that, those are not the people that we would identify and that we would go to and say, hey, can I go sit down and talk to you? But that's exactly the kind of people that are the Zacchaeuses of our day. What about women with long, complicated pasts that people whisper about but never actually talk to? Or the people who've built really tough exteriors and seem impossible to reach? the quiet ones who always sit by themselves and never talk to anyone. A lot of times those people, they can live their whole life around people and never be seen. People don't even know they're there. Or how about the loud ones that everybody avoids because they make things uncomfortable? All of those people are the Zacchaeuses of our time. We have to ask questions like, am I more concerned with my reputation or someone's redemption? What's more important to me? That someone is saved or preserving my reputation among society? Yes.
Don't forget that we was like kids. And not everybody was born in the church with a family that raised them up and all they knew was the church. If some in the building, perhaps, were those people, and we cannot forget that we had to be converted and someone had to evangelize us as well. And so for us to go into the world, we need to have that same compassion that someone had on us.
Someone was willing to be seen with me and to talk to me. I was a long-haired wannabe musician with an earring. That's now.
Very seldom, if ever, we're going to be in a position in Christ. We're not Jesus.
We are not.
We like to think that, like, everyone that I meet, and it's usually on a one-on-one, not in a crowd. Does not present itself. But I don't mind, so many times I will converse with these people. I will ask them about their religion. What do you worship? I'll invite them. I can say that 2 out of 100 have different faces. But to me, that's sort of what I find myself in a situation. Not that I could do or would have success, you might say that we what Christ did there. If times are different, we do things different than the way Jesus.
Right.
What he's teaching us here is the way to bring others to Christ, and not necessarily this type of situation, but in any situation.
Right, exactly. Have you ever missed an opportunity to share the gospel because you assumed someone wouldn't be interested? Yeah, I have. More than I care to admit. But what we got to understand is opportunities come disguised. Sometimes they're disguised as inconveniences. But a lot of times they're disguised as that coworker who's always irritable. And maybe you could be the person who just says, look, how can I help? Or a neighbor who never smiles. Or sometimes it's the opposite extreme. It's the successful person who seems to have everything and have everything figured out, but who is actually lost. But nobody, because they're successful and they have everything, nobody bothers to offer to help them because they just assume what? They don't need anything. They don't want any help. They're not lacking in anything. It's easy for us to decide for other people that they wouldn't care, or that they'd probably reject it, or they're too far gone, or they're too far ahead in the world that they have no interest. It's easy for us to make those determinations for people, but that is not what Jesus did in this case. Jesus didn't make his mind up for Zacchaeus. Jesus engaged Zacchaeus. And then Zacchaeus made his mind up. Zacchaeus climbed out of the tree. Zacchaeus went with Jesus. Zacchaeus listened, and Zacchaeus changed. And so we have to think about those kinds of things and not let the things that very often become barriers to us be barriers. We have to just be bold enough to just approach and ask the question. You see somebody sad. What's wrong? Is there something I can do to help? Now, a lot of times we don't ask that question because we're afraid that they're going to tell us what's wrong and ask us for help. That's a whole different discussion as to whether or not my heart is actually right, whether or not I'm actually desirous of coming to the aid of those folks. Did you have your hand up?
Question that, how many times have we ever asked someone, hey, you need a ride? No, come on, I'm going that way, get in, I'll give you a ride. How many times do we do that? We can see them walking. And,
right. Of course, it's terrifying, and we're afraid that they're going to be that weird hitchhiker that carries around a razor knife and slits our throat. So we don't want that. We don't have time. The time is escaping us, so we don't have time to discuss the last question that I wanted to discuss. I'm going to throw it out there just for you to play with mentally on your own as the day goes forward. What would it look like for me to stop and look? And that's what Jesus did. Jesus stopped and he looked up in the tree and saw Zacchaeus. What would it look like? And I'm talking about things like this. It might look like me simply being willing to slow down when my schedule is full and not say to someone, no, I don't have time. But instead say, okay, I got stuff to do, but what do you need? And if I don't get to the thing that I had planned done, guess what? If I live and we have tomorrow, I can deal with it tomorrow. But today, at this moment, maybe that's more important. And so it looks like that, or it might mean choosing to actually see someone instead of looking past them. Or it might be an invitation to a cup of coffee or a conversation or a kind word. Or it may even be just noticing somebody who is more often than not ignored. And the impact that just noticing someone who goes ignored can have is unbelievable. There's other ways that it might look, and we're out of time, unfortunately. But these are some things for us to think about, and the things that we can draw from the Zacchaeus story about what it means for me in my work to reach people with the gospel. Because listen, fact of the matter is, God desires all men to be saved. And the Bible is pretty clear that many are on the road to destruction and few are on the road to salvation. And if I don't see other people as people who are on their way to destruction, I'm never going to help anyone. And then once I see them that way, if I'm not bold enough to engage with them, they are never going to be helped. We need to get out of the rut of waiting for people to come to us and waiting for people to ask us. And we need to just start asking them. How's your relationship with the Lord? Are you a Christian? If they say yes, tell me about that. Tell me what that means. Tell me how that happened. Tell me your story. And that's when we learn the things that they know and the things that they don't know or don't understand well, and the door is open for us to say, but hey, have you thought about this? And all of a sudden, a door is open to a discussion, and a soul could be saved. I appreciate everybody's participation in comments tonight, and I encourage you to think seriously about the things that we have talked about, and just try in the week ahead to notice somebody and to stop and to say, hey, can we talk? And just see what happens. I appreciate your attention if there's anything that we can do for those that are present in the assembly tonight, changes that you need to make in your life. If you realize you need to make those changes, if you desire us to study with you about the things you need to do, or if you already know what you need to do and you realize that your life isn't right, you just need to repent and pray for forgiveness if you're a child of God that's gone astray, but you want us to pray for you, let us know that. Or if you're not an obedient child of God, never having been baptized into Christ, and you say, you know what, I need that, we're ready to help you with regard to that as well as we stand and sing.
I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea.